question. If you are not religious, if you don't believe in God, if you're not a Christian, can you tell me why?
I really appreciate any time a believer is willing to sit down and listen to the stories of those who have lost their faith. So because you asked it in such a genuine way, I'm going to give you a non-snarky, very vulnerable answer to your question. So like you, I was raised in church. I took my beliefs very seriously. I wanted to live the way that God would have me live. I ended up going to Christian theology school because I wanted to get closer to God and I wanted to understand the Bible more. And what happened in theology school is that I lost my faith, and I didn't choose to, and I didn't want to. I had no desire to. It would really mess up my life. I was married to someone who was a believer. I was raising children as a believer. I was a seminary teacher, so my job was dependent on me believing. I really did not want to lose my faith. But what happened is I got this little seed of doubt where I got so good in theology school being able to tell what kind of God a society will create, that I had this thought that I'd never had before that said, what if we're the ones creating God rather than God creating us? Because what happens, and I can still do this now, if you give me a society, don't tell me what it is, but tell me how the agriculture works, how the flooding works, how the social structure works, and I'll tell you what kind of God they would have created. And every time I'm right. And then you can even get to the individual level. Tell me your core values, tell me about your personality, and I'll tell you what kind of God you believe in or what kind of God your brain would have created, because we all have different conceptions of God. And I got so good at being able to guess, even in the Bible, something will change in the society, and then all of a sudden the theology changes or the God changes, that I just began to see this as a human project. And for the first time in my life when I was in theology school, I did something really scary. It took a lot of bravery. But I figured that if God was real and if the truth was truth, that it would be able to handle my little human questions. And I began to ask the question, what if there are better explanations for this? In the same way that if someone in your life had schizophrenia, you probably wouldn't say they have demons in them. We have a better explanation for that now. We say they have schizophrenia. And I started to look at that not just for mental illness, but and germ theory and things like that. But I started to look at religion from a human point of view, from a sociology point of view and a psychology point of view and an anthropology point of view. And what I found was this is an entirely human creation based on our human needs and our human fears. And once I put on that lens, which I didn't want to, because again, I didn't want to lose my faith, I had to admit to myself that the secular reasons for the way the world works and the way people are and the way we do what we do and the reasons behind religion were better reasons. They were better. They made more sense. And when it was time to write my dissertation, I had to admit to myself that I no longer believed in God, but I had learned a lot about human nature in the process, because religion is one of the best places to learn about what humans desire and the best and most beautiful things about human nature, but also our greatest fears. And once you have that bravery to actually look at spiritual experience, religion, scapegoating, superstition, all the things that we do in religion, ritual, awe, transcendence, if you look at things from the side of science, from the side of secularism, to see how they explain it or to see how it makes sense, it's going to be a better explanation than whatever explanation is in the Bible or in Christianity. It just makes more sense. And it's also more moral to take full responsibility for your moral actions and try to live a good life with no thought of reward than to put your moral sins onto someone else, to throw goats or virgins or gods into volcanoes in order to appease angry and jealous gods. It's much more moral to live a good life because it's a good thing to be a good person, just for the sake of you knowing what it's like to suffer. So because it felt more good to be outside of the church and more true to be outside of the church, and truth and goodness are really important to me, that helped me to leave the church, even though at the time I lost everything. And then I rebuilt my life. I rebuilt meaning and purpose and community and awe and transcendence and morality and ritual. I rebuilt all the good things that you get from religion without having to believe things that are essentially unbelievable and without causing so harm to so many people who are hurt by religion. So that's my story, and I really appreciate you listening to people who have lost their faith or who are non-religious. To this day, my family's never asked me. They've never asked me why I've left, and that's still very painful. So you just asking that question feels a lot more Christian than most of the Christians in my life. But yeah, for me, if I were to push you at all, it would be that there are beautiful things about religion, but I think that there's more truthful and more good ways to access those resources than with these old religions.